Today in the studio, we have all the new Citizen EcoDrive Sport models. And I think this is going to be the pinnacle, the best affordable sports watch from Citizen that they've released in recent times. So let's discuss everything that you need to know about these watches. Welcome back to the Chisholm Hunter channel. My name is Harrison, as always. And it's kind of weird to me. It's weird that these watches don't have a name yet. They literally on the website are the Citizen EcoDrive Sports watches, just describing the aesthetic of these watches. So before we start, drop below what you think the name of this collection should be. Because I've honestly got no idea. It looks kind of like a PRX slash Citizen Flare. I don't know how to describe it. Okay, so let's kick off. There are 4 different variants of this watch available. There are 2 stainless steel. There is 1 stainless steel that has kind of a galvanized, ionized, dark looking feel. It looks black and it's actually very, very cool. And then there's a kind of rose goldy looking one as well. Remember that there's not genuine gold and there's not genuine ceramic used here because they are that little bit cheaper. The material used on the black version or the more grey version is actually a grey ion plating. And the material used on the gold, because obviously it's not gold, is actually a rose gold toned stainless steel bracelet. So essentially it is stainless steel, it just looks a little bit different. There are 3 different dial variations to choose between. You do have a blue, and it kind of looks like the PRX waffly texture, apart from not as deep. That's how I would describe the texture on these dials. So you do have a blue, you have a kind of muted green teal, and then also on the black one, you have kind of more of a gray black dial. It's interesting how colors online just look so different to in person. I was looking at the teal kind of dark green one, and I was looking at it with Caroline, who I work very closely with, and Caroline doesn't like it at all, but I love it. It's just funny how different tastes like different things. I honestly think the teal color that they've used in this dial is just stunning. These models, of course, come in 41 millimeters in diameter, and because they have an EcoDrive movement, which makes them that little bit thinner, and we'll talk about that in a bit because it's really, really important, they wear really, really nicely on the wrist. They seriously do. 41, I would say it wears more like a 40. And on that note, I'm actually going to go and get my toolkit so that I can measure the thickness and the lug to lug. Okay, so we have my calipers and we also have a flashlight for the lume. But let's just see the thickness really quickly of these models. So all these models come in around about the 9.8 millimeters in thickness mark. 9.8. That is unbelievable. And honestly, the thickness of a watch has such a massive factor when it comes to wearability. Something that's too thick, in my personal opinion, like the Tissot PRX Chrono, it just wears that little bit too bulky. And because of that, it sits too high off the wrist to kind of slide under a cuff. Thickness just means a lot to me. And this is really damn nice. The lug to lug on this model comes in at around about 47.9 or 48 millimeters, which is a very, very comfortable, wearable lug to lug. Now, it doesn't have fixed end links, so you can see that the bracelet just drops straight down, which means that the lug to lug is the true lug to lug. When we look at the case and the bracelet on these watches, I'm just going to take the stainless steel one, for example, we can see that there is a definite correlation between the brushed and the highlights being in polished, and this accentuates those lines and kind of gives it a more futuristic look. And honestly, on the bezel of this watch, where you've got between like the 50 and the 60, for example, you've got that highlighted kind of indent line with stainless steel. It looks white in certain lights and it makes it pop that little bit more, as well as the lugs looking that little bit more sharp, that little bit more futuristic, that little bit more sporty, which I suppose this collection is. The bracelet doesn't have that much of a taper on it, which isn't as nice to me. I prefer a little bit more tapered bracelet, and it does have the polished middle link with the outer 2 being brushed. And they're actually H links. And the reason that I say that is when you look at the links from here, you can see that they actually have, it looks like H's on the way down. So it has H links. So that's what I call it. It does have a deployant clasp at the bottom, and it is very, very nice. It has flat stainless steel just below that deployant clasp, and it doesn't feel like the most expensive bracelet in the world, but remember what you're paying for this watch. It's relatively cheap in the luxury watch industry. Also, before we go any further, we did do a giveaway of a Citizen Super Titanium, so a huge congratulations to the gentleman that won that over in Canada. I really appreciate the support, and if you guys could hit that subscribe button at the moment to help us reach our next goal, and hopefully we can give one of these away at our next goal. it would be much appreciated. When we look at the face of this watch, we can see that the bezel is in stainless steel. And I've said this in multiple videos, but I feel like stainless steel bracelets, or bezels rather, are being rapidly replaced with ceramic, or just like my Tudor Black Bay here, the aluminium disc insert. Now, I'm much more a fan of stainless steel bracelets. I think it gives a nod to the history of watches, and it just gives it a very unique style. It gives it a very, I don't know how to describe it, a very authentic style to me. And I much prefer stainless steel bracelets to ceramic and also to aluminium disc inserts. But the problem that I could see with that is the stainless steel bezels will scratch that little bit more. They will scratch that little bit easier. So that's definitely something to bear in mind. These watches are water resistant to 100 meters and have a crown at the right hand side, which also looks very angular and very shaped. But what I would say is it could be that little bit difficult to turn. You can't really get in to get grip, but I suppose with the Eco Drive movement, you don't really need to wind the crown, because the Eco Drive movement is one of the coolest movements, or quartz movements, that are available. I feel like quartz movements get a really big stigma within the industry, but quartz is essentially more accurate than automatic. And although we all hate quartz movements because the quartz crisis and all the rest of it, I think they're still brilliant watches. And that goes across the board, not just with Citizen, but with other models. For example, the Tissot PRX quartz, you pay half the price and you still get pretty much as good a watch. When we take a dive into the dial, we can see that it does have kind of a waffly textured dial without the depth of, for example, the Tissot PRX. It does have a 3 o'clock date window. You guys know what I'm going to say about that. I do prefer 6 o'clock date windows, but it's nice that it has that feature. And it does have extremely strong superluminova. Honestly, I did not expect the superluminova that it has on it. It's actually quite wild. And on that note, what is on your wrist today? It's time for the Chisholm Hunter tradition, which of course is the wrist check. I'm currently sporting the Tudor Black Bay ETA Smiley. This is more of a vintage model now, I would say. And honestly, this watch has been getting so much more wrist time recently. And to top that off, listen to this. Oh, Tudor's bezel clicks. It's just, they're unbeatable. The dial of this watch really needs to be seen in person, if you want my opinion. It is honestly really, really striking. And the lume on this watch is something that I just did not expect. You can see me covering it up like an absolute nerd, but it's honestly something I didn't expect. You need to see it in person. And I suppose this is as good a time as any. Chisholm Hunter are official stockists of Citizen watches. If you want to see any of them, then click the link below or head to one of our 29 stores throughout the UK. At the 12 o'clock mark, of course, you have the Citizen logo, and at the 6 o'clock mark, you have the Eco Drive logo as well to show that it is an Eco Drive movement. Now, it does have a closed caseback because it has that movement, so let's just quickly go over what that movement actually is. What does it do? Why is it important? What does it do? The Eco Drive movement is a relatively new technology developed by Citizen watches and behaves very similar to a solar-powered movement. It was first introduced in 1976, and this was the world's first light-powered movement which ran on natural, artificial, and dim light without ever having to replace the battery, which is pretty wild to me. We're in quite a dimly lit studio at the moment because soft light is better for filming. You know, it makes me look a little bit more tanned because I am pasty and Scottish, but when you think about it, it is charging even when we're talking now within this light. So you don't need to worry about putting it outside, putting it in sun to get solar activation, which is a problem in Scotland. You can literally put it beside a light bulb. You can put it beside one of these lights that we have in the studio and it will charge up and you won't have any hassle with your watch. Now for the rose gold or the black looking model, the gray ion black looking model, which is super sexy by the way, you are paying about 249 quid, which is that little bit more expensive than the stainless steel model. The stainless steel models come in at 229. So for about 20 quid, you can upgrade to either the black or the gold. With that said, if you want my personal opinion, that teal green with the stainless steel, that is the sexiest model within this range. I honestly believe it's one of the sexiest models. It is super, super cool. And it does have a beautiful dial. It does have a beautiful aesthetic. Listen, it's never going to be to the same degree of standard as an Omega or a Rolex or one of those luxury watches. But for an entry-level luxury sports watch, I think this hit the nail on the head. I think what Citizen are doing with their Sayosa, I can never say that word, or with their Super Titanium is just bang on. And they're going to expand upon that range. And this is what we can see them doing with these watches. But enough of what I think. What do you think about these new watches? Please let me know in the comments. I'd love to know what you think. And on that note, please consider hitting that subscribe button if you enjoyed this video, or follow our Instagram at Chisholm Hunter Watches, or my Instagram at HP Life Lens, or our podcast at Into the Mind, or just the Into the Mind podcast. And on that note, I've rambled for too long. I'll see you soon.